All right, Joshua, what's up, man? Welcome back.
Hey, glad to be here, man. I love when I get to do podcasts the second time around
Yeah,
because even we got to spend some time with each other in person.
yeah,
It was cool. But I love doing it the second time around because I love sharing my story. But like, I think every time it ends, I'm like, oh man, I wish I would have said that, or I wish we would have talked about that. So glad to be back.
well, and you know what? I'm glad to have you back. We have something in common. We had, in the first time we recorded, we didn't have this in common, but dude, there's something new in your life, man. It's like 3 months old now, so what's up? Tell us.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, so I got this monster of a baby boy. So four boys. It's fun, man. It's fun being a dad, and just especially like the baby. It's just like
Yeah,
um, just watching Hope like do everything I can't do, and
yeah,
it's awesome. And I mean,
yeah.
it's humbling too. It's like, like I spoke at, because I mean, it's so funny. I end up in places that I'm like, what am I doing here? Like
Mhm.
at least once a week. I'm like, why am I in this room? Like I'm not gonna ask, I'm just gonna do whatever I'm being asked to do when I show up. But um I was speaking at this organization. It was like it was at a gala, and it was a Catholic organization called Forge, and it's in Des Moines. And this guy, his name's John Bishop, just like the coolest dude, and we hung out for a few days. And I'm just like, man, like I get invited, like as a non-Catholic guy, like I get invited to like all these like Catholic events. That It's just neat because I have this story that transcends, denomination, like socioeconomic, like whatever box you might like put yourself in. It's like for some reason, I end up in those places. And but anyway, that took me, like I was in Des Moines for a few days, and then I was in Omaha for a few days, and then I got back like pretty late. And I got back and I was home, and like I'm crashing, I'm like in the bed, and then 3 a.m. there's a little tap 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 on my arm, and it's my wife, and she needs help,
Yeah.
it's like everything in me wanted to be like, babe, I've been traveling, I've been doing this, I've been doing that, and then I'm glad that I didn't say what I was thinking, but at the same time in my mind I'm like, gosh, like what I've been like traveling and communicating and
Yeah.
mingling and doing all this stuff and like hearing stories and sharing stuff, and like she's been like in the thick of things
Yeah.
for 4 days by herself.
Right.
So I very quickly got up and grabbed said baby, and she got some sleep. But it's just like it's so funny where um like that does something to your heart,
Oh yeah, man.
um, like you loving that child more than you could ever comprehend. And then just, I think there's something like beautiful about like serving someone when you don't want to, like I didn't want to wake up, but like I love her more than my feelings. And I think just for that to be your response, like, hey,
Hmm.
like I think like just as a man, like on a daily basis, so for me on an hourly basis, I have to tell like my mind to shut up and not say or do the thing that I want to say or think. Or it's just like just this battle to do the right thing. But the beauty of it is the more that you do the right thing, the easier it is to do it. Um, but I think like just like having conversations like that, it's so important. Just like letting people into your world. It's like yeah, I get to do some cool stuff. We have a really beautiful life, but like gosh, um, how I got from like A to B was like really messy. And like anyone that's successful at anything, it's like it's a really messy process. It doesn't
Hmm.
matter like what you have at the end of the day. You gotta fight for anything that's good. Like you gotta fight for it, and that doesn't end. You know?
I agree, man. And yeah, I heard a quote from a previous podcast guest who just came on not too long ago, and he said, "The brain is the hardware and the mind is the software." And if we're
Yeah.
willing to always upgrade our software, because the brain is always going to be like, stay in bed, you're
Yeah.
exhausted, right? But the mind is like, I must be. And the mind, and the heart, it can sync as one as well, So you're speaking from your heart, you're speaking from love, to support your wife Hope, and this monster of a baby that you have, man, this little boy. Like, it's funny because I look at pictures of him and I think of my 16-year-old Mason. Mason was a lot like and what's the youngest's name?
Abel.
Abel. So you look at it, you look at Abel, I see Mason, who is like this. We used to call him the bulldog because he was like picking up a bulldog, which is impossible. They're small dogs, but they're thick and dense, and
Yeah.
they weigh a lot. And we always say, God bless, man, Mason's going to be a linebacker, or
Yeah.
he's going to be on the offensive line. And sure enough, man, he's playing center, and he is an absolute savage. I think he's the only sophomore in his high school, and his high school is huge, that ever hit the 900 club for
Oh,
squat, yeah, for squat, clean, and bench. And
okay.
he is just as strong as an ox. So be careful. The good
Yeah.
news is as your speaking career takes off and you need security, you Abel
Perfect.
can head up your security, so you'll be all
Perfect.
right.
Perfect. I love it. I love
You,
it.
you know what's funny, man? Before we get started with your book, because the last time you came on, we really covered a lot of your background and
Yeah.
and forgiveness, and which I think is great. And your book wasn't quite out yet. And now that I've read your book, and now that I've seen you speak, we're going to go in different directions today. But let's have some fun first with one more question, and that is, so I don't know about you. So you have four boys,
Yeah.
right? So welcome to that club. That club is a
Yeah.
very unique club. Number two, you have four under five. Like,
Yeah.
that's mind blowing to me. Like, I spread out ours, 10 years. So we have like the bigs who are super close in age, and we have the littles who are super close in age, but there's a 6 year gap between the two pairs.
Yeah.
But so many people, I'm sure you get this, like when they're like, how many kids you got? I'm like, four. And they're like, wow. And then they're like, boys, girls. And I'm like, four boys. And then the wow becomes another like, wow.
Yeah.
Like, what? And they're like, dude, how do you do it? And I joke with them back. And I'm like, I don't know. I was like, if you ever figure it out, let me know, because I don't know. But here's the interesting thing. Before four boys, like, I knew, like, you and I, we kind of grew up, quite frankly, very similar.
Yeah.
And I remember growing up, and being a dad was super important to me. As I've read in your book and I've heard you speak, it was super important to you. And it's something you always wanted to be. And I never actually thought I'd have four. I thought we might have two. But now that we have four, like, people are just like, dude, how do you do it? I'm like, and I'll look at people and be like, I would not change a thing. Four
No.
boys, man, all day long, the chaos, the energy, the loudness, the shenanigans. Like, it is, it's actually scary now that I've been doing this, because you just met my 18-year-old. I've been doing this now 18 years, and the thing that freaks me out more than anything, Joshua, is quiet.
Mm.
Like, when my house is actually quiet, I'm like, oh, this is weird, man.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest. Like, we like everyone. It's like to the person out there. It's like, oh, we did the sleep training thing. Like, kids don't come. Like my buddy Landon. He was telling me, and this is a great idea if it works for you. It doesn't work in our house, but his name's Landon, and he lives in Boise, and they have this, him and his wife, they have this thing on their bedroom, and it's literally like a stoplight. And they're like, if the light is
No,
red, you cannot come in this room. Bye.
no way, dude.
And he said, and it works. And I was like,
Really?
if my kids saw that, like, either they would rip it off the wall, or I mean, it's not stopping them from coming in our
No.
room. But but I say that to say, at the beginning of the night, it starts with me and my wife in bed, and then by 3 a.m. she's, in like our guest room, like rocking the baby, and then I've got, like three little gremlins like laying across me, on top of me, like, um so when I'm traveling, I have such a hard time sleeping, and like in a like queen bed or king bed, like by myself, I'm just like,
Yeah, it's weird.
some people would be like, oh, like so much room for activities. I'm like the quiet in the room is like
It's weird.
so weird that it's
Yeah.
like weird,
Yeah. No, I totally, totally get that. I actually hate, like, I travel, quite a bit for this. You and I were talking about that before as well. But I always bring one of my kids with me always. Like, I don't think there's ever hardly been a time I could probably count on one hand in the past 10 years where I've actually traveled without one of them with me.
That's awesome.
And it's great. And you and I were talking about, you know, you're going to get there, and it's amazing, man. We started doing it when the kids were 6, and it was just awesome. But
Well, there we go. So Cannon will be 6 in
there you go.
July. So
There you go, man. So, you know, what I want to do here, because the last time you came on the show, I don't know if there was a member in the audience who didn't hear that podcast because the downloads were absolutely monstrous. So, and rightfully so. But you know, I knew your story before you came on last time. I've heard you speak now, and now I've read your book, and I've gotten to know you as a friend, and you know, and I know like this true heart of a human being that you are. And the interesting thing about going back, you know, knowing who you are now, and then reading your book, especially the way you open up the book, like I'm vividly, like I feel like I'm sitting there with you, man.
yeah,
And you're on a plane and you're on your way back from Atlanta, and you're like, I hadn't really taken a shower yet. I just got done filming a scene. I had a check in my pocket. I was so depressed that you literally, I think you Googled like how many pain pills is it going to take, you know,
yeah.
for me to end my life. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, as I'm reading that book, and I'm like, the despair, like that you must have felt. And this was even like before Ubers, like you got into a cab and you're like,
Yeah.
you know, and then you go back to your house and you're thinking about like, well, I've got this check in my pocket, I can go deposit it, and you know, my mom or my siblings might have the money. But you know, to me, like knowing the individual that I know, and then knowing that character, right? That stage name and that person that you sort of had to become to do that. Like the internal battle that you had to been facing, and the conversations that you had with friends and family is like, and you kept saying in the book, you can do better. Like people would tell you that.
Yeah.
And so I'm so curious, 'cause I've never asked you this. What was it about that moment on that plane that made it, I guess, different than what you came across in the past? Like as far as like that battle in your mind and heart.
I mean, I think it was like, I don't know. I mean, if my apologies for, the crassness that I'm about to share, but I just think that, you're sitting there on a porn set, and it's often that like the way that a porn scene would often end, like most people like have in their head there's these like fluffers, or like there's this attraction between the two performers or whatever. It was a scene with multiple people, and there were people in like their own like corners with their phones watching pornography, masturbating, and then they get close to climaxing, and then one by one, like everyone's like, they let the director know it, everybody runs into place like it's at, in that moment, and then and then like each person finishes like that, and there was just like something like so sad
Yeah.
that this was I mean, like thinking about that, but the fact that like this was my typical Tuesday, and this is what my life had become. Um, I felt like I could see how sad the situation was, like almost like as an outside person, like looking at myself.
Like looking at it as a witness
Yeah,
in
and
a
it
way.
was
Yeah.
and it was like I didn't feel like I felt disgusted at what I'd become. And I I felt disgusted at what I'd become to the extent that I was in a pit that I didn't have a way of climbing out of. So I'm like, well, if this is how it's always going to be, I would just not, I would rather just not be. And it's like, from like, and that's just kind of where I was. And I was just like, man, um, I mean, the things that I would do on a consistent basis without, I mean, without even like thinking about it, because like in the industry you just like you get to an extent where you just say yes to anything because you believe that you can't say no to anything, because if you say no, then all of a sudden you break the relational equity that you have with that studio or that director. Then all of a sudden that director doesn't hire you anymore, and you believe that's the only thing that you can do. So if you cut yourself off from the only thing you can say yes to, then what? You like, you believe in your hearts of hearts, like, this is the only worth that I have. This is the only way that I can both make a living for myself, but also this is the only thing that I can contribute to in any capacity, because this is the only thing that I can do at all.
That makes total sense. Just getting to know you as a person, and I've been away from porn for a long time now, and knowing that the friendship that I've had with you over the past 6 7 months or however long it's been. I mean, I'm a human being. I still get tempted by it.
Yeah.
I mean, like I joke. You and I were joking here a minute ago. It's like, oh, it's really weird when the house is quiet. Well, it's when the house is quiet that's when my demons start to creep in and be like, oh, well, no one's here. Like,
Sure.
but the interesting thing is, since I've gotten to know you, I've read your book, and you've done, and I have followed your work. You've really pulled back the curtain on how dark this industry really is. And now, the way I view it is like, I actually feel tremendous pity for the performers, because like I'm sure there are some that maybe they enjoy it, or I don't know, but like I would think that the majority of them is like, this is not what I dreamt about when I was a little kid,
Yeah,
and they
but like
probably feel
check
so.
this. Yeah,
Yeah, go
but
ahead.
check this out. So even the person that would say, "I love what I do," right? So like, to the people like on the like whatever podcast. So like, this is a great example. I love what I do. This is my fantasy. This is the way I like to express myself. Literally, someone on that podcast that said, my fantasy is getting, a husband to cheat on their wife. Like, that's my fantasy. And like, someone confronted them. They're like, that is what, like that, like, you don't truly enjoy that. Like, there's some part of your mind that like is like, you're feeling chosen to some extent, or there's something in you, but like, you're not processing this rightly. Like, this is not the truest thing about you. And I think hearing that, she was like, well, yeah, like, she just kind of brushed it off. 6 months later, this person's giving their life to Jesus and leaving that industry. So I think there's like, I mean, I know I was there. I would say, I mean, even in relationships, it's like, I was in a relationship with this girl. She was like all about like being an exhibitionist, and doing all this stuff. And like, I grew up like I was, the jealous boyfriend, because I was the jealous kid to a single mom. And my identity was, I am my mother's son. This is who I am. That's the most important thing about me. And I will defend my mom against like the world. And that led to me being a you know jealous boyfriend. And I'm in this industry, and I'm dating someone that is, having sex for money, and I'm having sex for money. And we're like telling ourselves a lie that we're in this monogamous relationship. um, but then she wanted to talk about stuff that she was doing on set, like, with me. And I thought, well, what's wrong with me if I'm not okay with this? And I said yes to something. And it was almost like I was okay with like being masochistic to myself. Like, I was saying yes to something based on my fear of how she would perceive me saying no to that. So I just allowed that into my life. So I think you get to a point where you'll say, "Oh man, I love my job because on the other side of that is what? I'm a walking contradiction. I'm a hypocrite. I actually hate what I do. I just don't think I can do anything else. Like, dude, no, like the only like straw in which you hold on to your mental health is that you lie to yourself and say, I love what I do, because on the other side of that is I do this because I can't do anything else, because I don't believe I can leave this industry.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. Like I can really put myself in your shoes, going back to that moment where you're on the plane and and you're thinking those things, and
Yeah.
let me ask you this, and because I have a lot of notes to get to your book here too, but this bank teller,
Yeah.
like the way you described it in the first podcast, I thought she was kind of like young and in her 20s, but was a middle-aged woman, who was probably someone at the time, like could have been like maybe mom or like your aunt, you know, and it
Yeah.
sounds like she just looked at you so compassionately when you went to cash that check, and you were actually looking for someone to look at you as absolute disgust. So like that would have been a moment for you to be like, okay, well, yeah, I need to go home and then, commit suicide. But it
Yeah. I
was
mean,
in that moment. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, it's like I wanted her to agree with
Yeah.
me. Like I needed justification. And I mean, like I think that's where you get to. It's like your feelings are so tied to what other people think about you, because you are searching for affirmation and all these things from other people. It's like, how sad was it that I needed someone to agree with me that I was some way so that I could justify taking my life. I still needed someone's permission to
Yeah.
feel that way. And that's what I was searching for. I was searching for her to say, you know what, you are as bad as you think you are. You are
Yeah.
disgusting. You are whatever. And I didn't get what I thought I was going to get. Instead, I got compassion, empathy. Someone looked at me and saw me for who I was, like a human being, an individual that was, a human being deserving of dignity and value. And she saw this kid who was, shaking and scared, and said, "Hey, are you okay? Like,
Yeah.
how can I help you?" And it changed my life.
The question that I have for you about that moment, I have personally, and I know a lot of the people listening to this podcast, some are Christians and some aren't, and that's okay. My view of it is, hey, my faith is my faith, and we're going to meet you at this podcast where you're at, whether you're
Yeah.
faith based at or not. We want to invite you to good things like this. But I have truly felt that there was a God, like what one of my spiritual mentors calls a God wink, or a spiritual moment where that there was more at work than something earthly, right? I've personally felt when I started the Dad Edge, I felt it. Like there was this moment that I had in front of my computer where I had just spanked my 4-year-old son Mason, who's now a monster, which I would never mess with him now. But I was devastated that I had spanked him so hard he hit the ground, and I went into my office, and that's when I like literally just was like, I was on my computer and I was on Facebook, and I hit a button that said create a page, and I named it the Good Dad Project. Didn't even think about it, and that was my line in the sand of like, hey, I just need to learn this. Like I need to go out and do something different. This is not working. But for you, does this? I'm so curious. Have you ever seen this woman again, or does she have any idea what she's done for you? Like in that, what she did for you in that moment?
I mean, my hope is that some way, somehow, like she has heard my story.
Yeah.
But part of so we did this 8-part documentary style podcast called Unmentionable, and it tracks my story chronologically, and it takes a deep dive into the growth of the porn industry. So we start with, we're interviewing a church history expert and talking about what does sexual immorality look like in Ephesus and Corinth. And then like as it grows on, like we're looking at like the growth of, print and magazines to, and then silent films, and then, back in the day of like LimeWire and all that stuff, and then what we see it to be today. But anyway, in the part of that journey was we went back to Hollywood, and we went back to where I used to live, where I used to play, and we went back to where I lived that day that I was going to take my life, and we, tracked my steps where, I'd gotten home, and I was living at, it was like the corner of this busy street, like on Sepulveda, like in Sherman Oaks, and the bank is like, so if you're at like across, it's like on the, the left corner, so I'd have to like cross the street twice to get to it. And we went there, and there was a bank there, but the bank that I went to was a Chase, and the Chase wasn't there, but there was another bank there, and I was like, just maybe, whatever. But then I was like, kind of like, remember there was like two banks or something, and then we went in, and there was a security guard there, and we're asking him. I was like, "Did there used to be a Chase Bank here?" He's like, "Yes, it's turned." It was like it was a gym. It was like one of those like yoga slash like hybrid gyms or whatever. He's like, "Yeah, it used to be here," and but not the person wasn't there, and the gym wasn't there. But my hope is that she hears that her simple act of what I believe was a prompting from the Spirit of God, her simple act of, kindness, it literally saved my life and changed the trajectory of my life. And I think that's an encouragement and a prompting for each of us. Man, there's like, it's so easy to, put our headphones on and walk around with our head down, but like there's a world of broken people that just need, the simplicity of like, hey, how are you doing? And actually waiting to hear the answer, or remembering someone's name, or, texting the friend that hasn't texted you back, or calling the friend that hasn't called you back, or whatever it might be. It's like doing the simple thing that seems like, not a big deal, and somewhat of an inconvenience. They could literally save and change someone's life.
That's that's, um that's a strong reminder. So, gentlemen, if you're listening to this episode, which I know you are because we're in your ears, that friend that you haven't heard from, maybe a family member, sibling, if you haven't heard from him in a while, shoot him a text, let him know that you're there. Um, Joshua, before we jump into your book, because like I said, I've got some notes here that I want to go over, but your story to me rings one thing that is just amazingly strong and powerful for me, just as a human being, as a dad who screws up every single day. And I get in these ruts, man, where I feel what I've done is unforgivable. And now I know, I mean, I've written my own book. It's coming out here on Father's Day called The Spirit of Fatherhood. It's a Christian-based, faith-based view to approach fatherhood. And I know that that is a lie. I know it's a lie. But I didn't always know that it was a lie. I used to actually feel a lot of hopelessness. I actually used to feel I better make this life as best as I can because I don't know where I'm going after this.
Right.
And I'm not saying I lived like reckless, but I would also like, I would hold on to like these mistakes and these things I've done and where I've been a bad friend or a bad son or a bad husband or a bad dad. And I'd sit there and think, well, what's the point of going to church? What's the point of praying? Because how in the world am I ever truly going to be forgiven? Because I'm a human being, because I'll ask for forgiveness today, but I'll screw up again tomorrow.
Yeah.
So like, what's the point of it all? And to be honest, man, I would love for you to answer that question. Like, why is that a lie that we buy into? And it's very easy for us to buy into it.
Yeah, just as a man, something you think about is, what kind of legacy am I going to leave? And, legacies are never defined by moments, they're defined by seasons. And I think if we allow a moment, or, an event or series of events to define who we see ourselves to be, we will live as if that lie that we believed is truth, and it will impact everything we do for a long time. But what actually is true is that one mistake doesn't define who you are. One victory doesn't define who you are. Um, there's this, especially in Western culture, everyone's all about like, cancel culture, like canceling this person. This person said this, they need to be canceled. This person did this, they need to be canceled. It's like, man, I'm so glad that that is uh, not the way that God sees us. I'm
Yeah.
so glad that that's not the most true form of reality because, man, I think it's like you need to acknowledge, like, man, there is like evil in the world, and that evil wants to lead you away from good things. Like that makes sense to anyone, regardless of like where you land spiritually. Like, you know, the byproduct of being in proximity to evil is being away from good. And I think if there's an evil being in this world in which we would call Satan, if you have a biblical worldview, then and he wants you to believe the worst of yourself, because if you believe the worst of yourself, you won't give the best of you to the world. You won't give the best of you to your family. You won't give the best of you to your community, because the reality is there's breath in your lungs because there's purpose for your life. There's something for you to do. There's a family for you to lead. There's a purpose for you to fulfill. There's things in the earth that you have unique talents. You are where you are logistically, um, right now in this point in time, so that you can do something. But when we believe that our faults and our lacks and our missteps define who we are, we wallow in them and we allow that lie to become truth. But what the way that we approach life, as we should, is that when we fail forward, right? Learn from our mistakes. Like, don't trip over the same thing twice. If you do something that you ought not do and it makes you feel bad about yourself, like, don't stay in that rut. Eradicate that behavior from your life. If you keep going back to this place that leads you to not do something you don't want to do, or causes you to feel shame, or do whatever, it's like, man, why do you want to keep going back to that empty well? Because there's a better way. So I would just say, man, to the person that has done, the absolute worst thing imaginable, there's still forgiveness for you. And it's, to the guy who tried to convince someone to get an abortion, to the person that has hurt someone, to the person that has cheated on their wife, to the person that has hurt their kid, the person that, whatever it is, whatever you've done, it's so easy for you to say, this is who I am. And there's a God that loves you and does not see you as your worst mistake. He actually sees your worst mistake and says, you know what? You're worth dying for.
Mhm. Yeah,
I love you at your worst, and you're
yeah.
worth dying for. And if you come to me, I will not only heal you and forgive you, but I will transform your pain into purpose so that you can walk alongside someone else and say, I've been where you've been, and you don't have to stay there.
Just as you say that, like it's just this incredible reassuring, just statement, that reassures all of us. You actually have a whole chapter in your book on false purpose. And the way I think you mentioned in the book is a lot of, we're living for ourselves,
Yeah.
correct? And but I know we don't necessarily belong to ourselves,
Yeah. I mean,
correct?
that's the lie that started in the garden. It's like Satan was like,
Yeah.
hey, um, did God really say? And there's this just false narrative that we can be a good lord of ourselves. Like we know what's best for ourselves. And um, again, like it goes back to the heart. Like, you the Bible talks about this, like Jeremiah 17 talks about the heart's deceitful and wicked among all things. Who can trust it? And there's this quote that I talk about in the book where um, Bill Gates was talking about like the most important thing that you can do is follow your gut, trust your heart.
Steve Jobs.
And yeah, Steve Jobs,
Yeah,
yeah,
Steve Jobs, because I
yeah, yeah, and it's just like, gosh, man, what terrible advice, what terrible advice, because your heart and your gut, those are based on your feelings. Those aren't even based on facts. Those are based on feelings, and your feelings, like they always lead you to satisfy what you think is best for you in that moment, and it doesn't take in the grandeur notion of everything. And I think like we can most certainly get to a place where we inform our hearts and say, okay, I can't create my own autonomy and know what's best for me, but God knows what's best for me. And if I want to find purpose in this life, it's going to be on the other side of surrender. And if I surrendered that, okay, his truth is better than my feelings, and me serving him looks like me being in submission to his word because he's provided a better way for me. And just getting out of this thinking like, God's good. And when you hear things like John 14:15 of him saying, if you love me, you'll obey my commandments. If you're looking at God through like the image of some brokenness, like with your human your earthly father, you could hear, well, if I don't do what God says, he's going to withhold his love or take his love away from me, or he's going to like come down with this iron fist. But what that portion of scripture is really saying, and if you understand the tone of God, you'll understand the character of God. If you understand the character of God, you'll see God saying, hey man, um, if you trust me, I've got a better way. And the world might say this and you might feel that, but if you just trust me and live like this, there's freedom and hope and peace and satisfaction on the other side of that. And I'm actually trying to protect you from the world and from yourself.
it's interesting now that I've gotten to know you, and I know a lot of other Christians that are very, very strong in their faith, and they always have this, like, I always get this feeling around them that everything is okay. I can't
Yeah.
explain it, but what I mean by that is like, if things are going bad, like, of course, there's a part of us that's always going to feel somewhat turmoil, right? But in a way, when we know that we can trust something that's bigger than us, it gives us reassurance, right?
Yeah. I
But
mean, that's why
go
I
ahead.
was gonna say that. That's why it's like my favorite Bible verse is John 16:33. It's like I've told you all these things so that you can, and in me, you can have peace. In this world, you will face tribulation. Things will happen. You will screw up. People will hurt you. The world will seem like it's falling apart. People will die. People will let you down. People will hurt you. Cats' heads are falling off. Like all this stuff is happening. And in spite of all that,
Yeah.
you know, take courage, be of good cheer, because I have overcome the world. So in Christ, you have access to peace and you have access to courage because number one, hey, stuff's going to happen that don't line up with what you think is going to happen. It's going to cause like you to feel like, everything is, everything's falling apart, but you can have courage because in the end, I win. And because I've already won, you're going to spend forever with me,
No matter what.
no matter what.
Can you give us an example of how, like, so, like yourself, right?
Yeah.
I have no doubt that your life and your mission is not sunshine and roses. Even though
Oh,
every time I see you, you have a smile on your face, right? You're gonna have, like, anytime I'm sure you post something on social media about Christ or something that you just want to share that's something about your faith, you get people that just bash you and hate on you, right? You're gonna get people that say things to you. You know, raising four boys, that's not for the faint of heart. There's going to be challenges. There's going to be
Yeah.
crazy things. Being married with four boys under five, there's going to be challenges. Being an in-demand speaker and author, like there's mad chaos coming at you, you know, from I'm sure all angles.
Yeah.
So how is it? And it's every time I talk to you, I would really just love for you to get almost even tactical with us of like
Yeah.
how is it that you just keep this every time I've seen you or talk to you calm.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like in a real way, like I mean, how does a sniper like keep, their hands still and take a shot in the middle of, uh, a pressure situation or, like bombs like going off around them. Um, they're so focused on what they know that it doesn't matter what they can't control. And what I know to be true is there's been I've literally looked death in the face. And in spite of myself, there was a God that loved me enough to rescue me from myself. And because I've experienced his love in a tangible way, that I don't even know that I could do it justice. I couldn't even articulate in words what I felt inside, and what I've been released from, like mentally. I mean, literally, like Men in Black, the racing of the memory of so many things, um, out of his love for me. Um, I think when things happen, I just know in the end, it's 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 all going to be okay. Um, and I think that's just who he is. I love that verse like John 16:33, when he's talking about, so I've told you all these things so that in me you can have peace. And thinking about the word peace, uh, in Hebrew, shalom, and like what that word means. So it means like 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 a structure is complete. So it could be, like a soldier came back and his armor was fully intact. There was no wounds. He didn't lose anything. But also it could be this like brick wall. And like this is, I see like things in pictures sometimes. So it's like, it's describing this brick wall where like every brick is where it needs to be. This beautiful foundation is where it needs to be. And I think to build the wall in which you need to prevent the world from crushing you, you've got to give the bricks in which you built your life with away and replace them with the bricks that God has for you, with His love, with His peace, with His patience, with His self control, these gifts of the Holy Spirit. And for me, I can find so much peace in turmoil because of what I've been rescued from.
I love that, man. You know, I want to address something that we were talking about before we hit record. And I think that, to be honest, I think the next few minutes, I think will be really informative for people. So,
Yeah.
like you mentioned, you've been invited to go talk to Catholic churches and that kind of thing, right? So
Yeah.
I was raised Catholic,
Yes, that was my wife.
and yeah, and, um, I still practice Catholicism to this day. We actually love our faith, and um, the interesting thing about the way I was raised, and I think that this might have been like an old school thing. I don't really know, but my grandmother and my mom would always, you know, like, did you go to church? I'm like, no, I didn't go to church. You're going to hell. That's a mortal sin. What is wrong with you? You need to go to confession. And it was like, no matter what, there was this guilt, almost like it felt like fear mongering, almost hatred.
Yeah.
right? Like just a lash out in a way. And I'm like, my gosh. I was like, and I remember being a kid being like, I'm so confused. Like there's mercy and forgiveness, but yet I'm just like, you know, like for instance, I don't know if you know the singer Jelly Roll.
Yeah.
He's got a song called The Lost. Have you ever heard that?
I haven't.
It's the lyrics are fascinating. So like he talks about basically the whole song is about people who are Christians who are like who use fear mongering to basically say you're a bad person, you need to be more Christian. And he's got this line in the song. He's like, "That's like pouring gasoline on my soul."
Yeah.
And I know you have a story and an example of this. Of I don't know exactly where we got away from it, but even we're watching The Chosen, and the people that sinned or whatever, like they were like stoned, or like you know if you had certain sins, you were abolished from like the community and stuff like that. Like you couldn't even enter or do these things. And I think that approach is for a lot of people who are trying to find faith, that can almost be a deterrent. And I know that you have a story kind of about this, about yeah,
Yeah, I mean, well, I mean, this is not only happened to me, it happens currently to me. Even though,
right,
I've been out of the porn industry for 11 years, I've been following Jesus for almost 9. Um, no, so it has been 9 years. So I've been following Jesus for 9 years. I've been out of the porn industry for 11. And I still get people that question the genuineness of my faith, and it's because of if my life doesn't meet the bar in which they set for holiness, then I must not like have access to the grace of God, or not even my current life, but like if I've done X, Y, and Z, that somehow disqualifies me from the things I've done. And I always find it so interesting when people say, it's like, okay, you're saved, that's great, but like you can't be a preacher, you can't be a pastor. I was like, dude, read the Bible. Like Moses killed someone, and then God chose him to lead his people out of Egypt. David saw something he shouldn't saw because he wasn't somewhere he should have been, and then he committed adultery. Some people could argue like it was essentially like he used his power to rape this girl, and then she got pregnant, and then he killed the girl's husband Uriah to cover up what he did. And that Peter denied Jesus 3 times. Like on and on and on. Like Saul, like he was going around persecuting people that were following Jesus. He was persecuting followers of Jesus. He was persecuting Christians, and he was restored, redeemed, and he went to go on to, write around 60% of the New Testament. So all of these people did things that I haven't done. If we're going to put sin on a scale, it's like they've done worse things than me. But for some reason, because the sin in which I partook in especially in westernized society, we make sex a god. So my story is such an anomaly because we value sex so much. So like people will say like, gosh, like you can't be a pastor, you can't do this, like what? And then it's like, what are you going to tell your kids? It's like, my gosh, man, like what? Like why are you so angry at me? And but like today you've got girls coming out of OnlyFans, like several like very notable girls who operate in the top tier, earning wise, of OnlyFans are coming out of this that industry, and they're giving their life to Jesus. And people are like, I'll believe that you're genuine if you give all the money back. I'm like, okay, in where in the Bible does it say that? It doesn't. But then also it's like, okay, what, like on a practical basis, what good is that going to do? You take someone out of an industry in which they've made, their identity. and that is the primary, catalyst for all of their resources, and they leave that industry. So now, like, if they were in debt, they would be a better follower of Christ. If their life was like more complicated, now that they've stopped doing the thing that they've, earned money doing, if they gave the earnings away so that their life was more complicated, they would be more like Christ. That's not biblical. And it's like, man, you see Luke 15, like the story of the prodigal son. It's like, man, when the son returns home, the father runs to him. He puts a ring on his finger, a robe on his back, and shoes on his feet, and say, "Let's ride. Let's have a party because my lost son has come home." That is a biblical response to someone leaving, a life of depravity and pursuing a life of holiness in Christ. Like, that is the Christian response. Anything other than that is the reason that he's telling that story, because he's talking to the Pharisees and the Sadducees. So the Pharisees have this legalistic tone, and the Sadducees don't believe in the resurrection. So both of them are wrong. Both of them are lost, and you are resembling them when you respond in that way. You are acting like the thing that Jesus called a brood of vipers when you respond in a way, in any other way other than, wow, that's incredible that they left that life and they're seeking the person of Jesus. That's amazing. Any other response than that, it doesn't matter what, like, Jesus will sort that out, right? Like, Jesus will sort their heart out. And it's not like we clean ourselves up and then we come to Christ, because we can't clean ourselves up anyway. But if you believe that you can clean yourself up, that's what Satan wants you to do, because you'll keep trying to clean up your life and you won't be able to, and you'll stay stuck in this cycle of trying to prove people wrong, trying to prove yourself right. I'm ashamed, so I'm going to stay stuck where I am, but I need a little dopamine hit of my sin to make me feel better. And around and around and around you go, and you never take a step towards Jesus because you stay stuck where you are because you believe you can fix yourself, but you can't. And it's just frustrating and sad to see the world where people who call themselves Christian are speaking like Satan, and they're driving people away from Christ because they
Mm-mm.
think, man, if that is what Christianity looks like, no thanks. But what Jesus says in John 17, he's talking about, hey, when when the world sees you, they should see me. Like, not necessarily uniformity, but unity. When Jesus sees my people, they should see me. And that's not what we're doing.
See, that gives reassurance to me that, you know, we can be forgiven. Like I think about it like this. Let me just ask you this, because I know my answer, and I'm pretty sure I know yours. Is there anything on the planet that your boys would do that you could not forgive them for?
No chance.
No chance. So, and here's the interesting thing, right? There's not even a degree of forgiveness that we could give ourselves that we would give to our kids.
Right.
Sometimes we don't let ourselves off the hook. And then, like you said, we don't allow others off the hook
Yeah.
for transgressions that they've done. I look at even like there's this part in The Chosen, which by the way we love watching The Chosen, where where Jesus calls Matthew. Do you watch The Chosen by chance?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
there's that part where he calls Matthew, right? And there were 4 episodes before he actually calls, or actually, I'm sorry, 7 episodes, I think, before he actually calls Matthew. And you see the turmoil that Matthew is going through as a tax collector,
Mhm.
and his people hate him, right? And the Romans don't like him either, because
Yeah.
he's still a Jew, and he's like he's wealthy, he's rich, has all of his needs met, but yet he is absolutely broken, and you can see it. And then it's almost like he is just, he sees Jesus, and he's just hoping, that there's some way, shape, or form he can get close to him, right? And then
Yeah.
Jesus calls him, and even the apostles, like Peter, and they're like, "What are you doing? Like, what are you doing?" And Jesus is like, get used to different, right?
Yeah.
But that just and the whole thing with Mary Magdalene as well, where he forgives her and renews her, restores her. And it's fascinating to me
Yeah.
that that forgiveness is always available to us by our Creator.
Yeah.
And yet we as people, we have the hardest time, forgiving. And actually, that's one of your chapters is refusal to forgive, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, um, yeah, and I think like in relationships and then even with ourselves, man, there's so much I want to say, but I'm just thinking about a few things. So like just thinking that, primary audience being men and many of them dads, um, I'm just thinking through like, man, uh, regardless of your best intentions, like you will parent through your brokenness and you will hurt your kids because you are hurt. And sometimes through your parenting, through your brokenness, what you'll do is you'll think that you're trying to protect them from the thing that hurt you, but you're actually hurting them by the way that you're parenting them. And I think that's why it's so important for us to get in community and for us to experience freedom. And what's true is we're only as free as we're honest, and we need to get better at being honest and not like the 99%, like not confessing the 99% that everyone else is like, yeah, me too, me too, me too. No, man, the thing that you've been stewing on that you did or was done to you or you didn't have that has just been festering in you, and you feel like, man, if I say that, I'll seem like I'm weak or I'll seem like I'm whatever. Man, there's someone in your life that you trust. You need to get that off your chest because that thing is holding you captive and it's minimizing your effectiveness as a man. Uh,
Mm.
and then uh, and actually just like around that forgiveness, it's like many of us don't forgive because um, when when that extension of forgiveness, like when when I extend that forgiveness, if the reconciliation or the byproduct of my forgiveness doesn't meet my expectations, I often withhold the forgiveness because I don't believe that the thing that I think should happen is going to happen, or the thing that I hope is going to happen is not going to happen, so I don't even bother. I don't forgive the person that hurt me because I don't think that the relationship will be reconciled to the extent that I hope. So why bother? That was my story with my dad. I didn't think reconciliation would meet my expectations, so I didn't even bother because I thought, well, he's just going to reject me again anyway, or he's just going to hurt me again anyway, or I've done too much anyway, so I'm not going to bother. And I think we do that to ourselves.
Mhm.
It's like, why am I going to like confess a thing, or like, how can I forgive myself? Because I'm just a screw up anyway. It's just like that's just not who I am. And I like around forgiveness. I just want to share this like one thing, and I think it's just a really great lesson. Like the Bible is such a great book to just take these practical lessons. So Peter, he was like, the royal screw up. He thought he was a fisherman. No, just like, nope, you're fisher of man. It's like, and then he had the guts to say, hey, Jesus, call me out onto the water. It's like, I'm gonna walk on water. And like he does all this stuff, and then like Peter was like the OG rock. He was a rock before the rock was a rock. And then three verses later, he's Satan because Jesus is saying, "Hey, I'm gonna be crucified," and he's like, "No, I would never let that happen." And then Jesus actually says, "Hey, you're gonna deny me three times. No way, no way would I do that." And if you would have gave him a lie detector test, I guarantee you he would have passed. He believed in his guts of guts that he would never do that thing, yet he did it anyway. And after he had done it, we see this point where Jesus is restoring him and he's asking him, hey, do you love me? He says, yes. So he asked him three times, do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? Yes, yes, yes. And what's so interesting is that every time Jesus says, do you love me? Yes. Go feed my lambs. Go feed my sheep. Go do the thing that I called you to do because that is who you are. you have believed that you're a mistake. That's why you went back fishing, because you thought you were who you used to be. So you're defining yourself through the lens of your mistake, but that's not who you are, because you don't have the power to identify yourself. Who do you think you are? Do you love me? Okay. So see yourself through my love and be the person that I called you to be. Go do the thing that is impossible for you to do without me. Go become the person that I have called you to be, because you can't do that on your own. Stop staying in your brokenness, because your pity party is not helping anyone and it's destroying you. Own up for your mistakes, turn away from them, and go do what I called you to do. Because there is so much more available for you on the other side of forgiveness. Like, that is what you're called to. And then he
I,
does, you know?
yeah, man. You know what? Just a quick reflection here. You know what's really cool about that last few minutes is, for me, I felt like in a way that would be the voice of God giving me some tough love, right?
Yeah.
Forgiveness, right? Forgiveness is here for you,
Yeah.
but I also know better for you.
Yeah.
And, and he'll push us to do
Yeah.
those things, right? He'll show us these signs and these breadcrumbs and these things that we need to see in order to live into our best and live for him, right?
Yeah.
And man, every time I talk to you, I just I always want the conversation to keep going. Like I love talking to you. I love our conversations, and I love, Joshua, what you stand for. And guys, like I said, we're talking to Joshua Broome today. His brand new book just came out not too terribly long ago. 7 Lies That Will Ruin Your Life: What My Journey from Porn Star to Preacher Taught Me About the Truth That Sets Us Free. Go follow this man. Go buy his book.
Let's go.
I'm in the last chapter myself. I have loved the book. I've gobbled it up. It's been fascinating. And Joshua, at the end of the day, man, I appreciate you and everything you stand for. I appreciate your friendship. And for me, I think about you more than you probably think, or than you probably know, because
I
there
appreciate
are
it.
times, and the reason I say that, I say that to you as a good friend and a mentor in this, and that is when I get in my own head, right? Like you've had that moment, and we've
Yeah.
had many moments like that, where I feel there's just no hope for me. Like what I've done is just too bad,
Yeah.
right? I'm always reminded, like, no, 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 wait, that's a tool of the enemy. There are other people that I know that have lived through things and who are on the other side of it and are preaching this good news. And
Yeah.
you are. So thank you for what you're doing, man. It's
Yeah,
it's
man.
it's, it's life changing.
And I think, that's the just truth of like our minds. Like um it's like it's never as bad as we think it is. Um and we are capable of so much more than we
Yeah,
ever could hope or dream.
I agree. I agree. Gentlemen, we're going to have a link for you in the show notes for Joshua's book, as well as his Instagram. I watch everything Joshua puts out. I love his stuff. I love his messages. Go follow him on Instagram. We'll have a link in the show notes for you, Joshua. What is the best place for these guys to follow you, or if they, obviously your book, and what if they want more?
Yes, I mean, I post the most consistently on YouTube. I'm sorry, not YouTube. I post the most consistently on Instagram. Trying to get better at other platforms, but I post the most consistently on Instagram. So I am Joshua Broome. And if you had an individual question or a speaking request, joshuabroome.me is my website. And I got to get better about putting out my speaking schedule. I usually just do that on IG. It's like, hey, I'm going to be here in 2 days or whatever, but I got to get better at that. But I've got a good team around me, so I just got to use them more effectively.
Well, guys, like I said, not to worry. We'll have all those links in the show notes for you. All you have to do is go to thedadedge.com/4 476 for this show. Again, thedadedge.com/476 for this show. Joshua, thank you so much for coming on, man. Appreciate you so much, brother.
Thank you, Larry. Appreciate you, bro.
You bet.